right, let's get this stream on the road. Hi there, it's Mark Delgros, project lead for LoreLink, the campaign management tool system. All right, let's go directly into this because we're going to do something wild and crazy, and I'm actually going to, show myself in the main screen for a brief bit because I'm talking about that thing, Daggerheart. And I'm talking about that because I'm basically doing this one because I have the big box, the huge box. My audio is out because the video capture device likes to record my voice. It stops that right there. Don't do that. You don't get to have a camera. Hi. Now that I'm not doubled. Hi, it's me. We're talking about Daggerheart today. And we're talking about this big box of things. So, actually, we're talking about two things today. We're going to talk about this for a little bit, because, there's this giant box, and I figured might as well open it up, look at it, talk about it a little bit. And then, secondly, we're also going to talk about, basically, we're going to talk about the one thing that this thing doesn't have. It's a massive box, and it has a whole bunch of stuff in it, but the one thing it doesn't actually have in it is a world. There's not really a defined world for Daggerheart. And so we'll get to why that is and what that means here in a bit. We're also talking about, basically, as the system of the day talks about, we'll talk about a couple other systems that have done similar things with collaborative storytelling, and so you can steal stuff from them to also improve your experience in doing basically a collaborative storytelling method. And what exactly does that mean? So, but first, let's talk about this thing. So this is the Daggerheart. I don't know if it's the... Basically, they didn't kickstart it because they were smart and they just went, hey, we're going to make this, and so we're just going to actually, pre-order it like normal people as opposed to crowdfunding it for something that doesn't really need crowdfunding and therefore taking up valuable space for other smaller companies that actually use the crowdfunding platform as a marketing thing as opposed to just being a giant thing that's sitting out there. There are a couple other companies that do that, and so it's always a little bit of a stretch. But let's not get into that. So what is inside this giant box? So the reason why I got the giant box, besides the fact that it looks super cool and nice, is that I like when I do jamming stuff in person and at tables, whether at conventions or at my house or whatever. I like having physical things to give to people because you give somebody something physical while they're at the table, it gives them something to latch onto. It basically changes your memory of the experience. It gives you something to take home, to remember, to think about. It improves the experience a little bit by just giving you something. And for a lot of people, especially people who tend to play RPGs and things like that, they need something else to focus on, fidget with, otherwise occupy themselves with while they're playing the game. And if you give them something physical, like this stuff, they're less likely to basically have to resort to pulling out their phone or something like that. And once you pull out your phone, you can sometimes get sucked in. So physical stuff like this can give you really neat stuff. Plus character sheets are always cool. I have one kind of complaint. This is their handouts bundle. It's really nice that they give you a bunch of handouts. It's supposed to make you try to photocopy a bunch of stuff in a day and age where a lot of people don't have printers anymore. And local libraries are in danger. The biggest problem I have with it is that, this isn't one stack of the character sheets. You can see it says that the spreadsheet here, that's the character sheet, but inside of here is character sheets for that. There's also character sheets for the druid class. There's also warrior stuff. There's also, ranger character guide stuff. There are also character creation guides. Again, it's a bunch of neat stuff, and basically it's nice that it's all in here. And a quick reference for equipment. Yeah, they glue bound them all together, which means that eventually, this glue binding it's meant to come apart, so it will come apart. But if you want to pull out, oh hey, I really want this map, I have to pull just this map out of the middle of it, and hope that in doing so, basically, I'm probably going to wreck the glue binding, and basically, this is going to end up in 3 or 4 different piles. and basically, probably what you're going to end up doing with this is separating it into its own piles and coming up with your own division system, which is a shame because, again, this is a really nice box, but basically there's no way to store them separated. Yeah. So, but those are nice. Physical character sheets are nice. GM screens, they added a nice gold edging. GM screens are always nice because they give you a quick reference guide, because I always talk about at the table, basically you like being able to, basically you don't want to slow the game down looking things up, and it's a big book, and so this gives you a bunch of really quick and easy stuff to do in the, basically to pull out, to look up difficulties, to figure out stuff, even has some, basically some, hey, when should I do X and Y, some GM best practices, which are really nice to see. So, basically nice GM screen. The book itself, basically, it's kind of interesting the fact that it doesn't say Daggerheart on the cover. It just says Daggerheart on the side. I think this may be because it's in the limited edition box, and maybe that's what they're doing. But nicely bound, good paper, smells nice. The other, basically, but the real reason why we came here is this, basically, inside this box, there's also a pull drawer. Ooh. I have two, basically, okay, kind of decided to go with the GM screen version. So basically, so the last thing you get is this drawer, which is in here. And this is the real reason why I picked it up, is because already seeing a slight problem. Yeah, I had the box slightly tilted. Oh no. These card slots are not quite deep enough. Hang on, I will be back with you in just a second. I have to resort all of these things to make sure I put them mostly back where they belong. Okay, so inside, basically they do, Daggerheart basically breaks up a lot of their game mechanics and things like that onto these cards. Now, they have a section in the, basically in the book and in the PDF, basically where they have all of these cards, basically in a format that you can reference. They're right there. You can get all of them. But they really want you to print all of those out, and essentially either print them on cardstock or print them on paper and laminate them. Yeah, I opened them up before showing them off. Basically, they're no longer near mint or something. I don't know. And so you have all of these things in, basically in this edition of it, they pre-printed all of those and gave them to you. They're nice and shiny because, again, basically they give you an edition. And these are great because the biggest thing you're going to run into with something like Daggerheart is you're going to have a lot of people who will either be showing up and be like, hey, Critical Role made this thing. We want to play the thing that Critical Role made. And they may be people who have either only played D&D, or maybe they're people who have never role played before at all. And A, having physical stuff is great for basically keeping people's attention at the table. And B, basically, this is how they do a lot of the abilities and other stuff in the game, is now you get this, basically much like the spell cards in D&D and things like that. They're great ways of, okay, here's your ability. Basically, you get to pick out what abilities you want. You determine what you are, what level you're at. And so you can see these have like a level 1 in the corner. Focus. Camera, figure it out. Maybe. There we go. You can see they have a level 1 in the corner. They also have costs and other stuff and a description of what the ability does. And so these are things you can hand your players and be like, okay, I need you to pick one of these or two of these or however many your class gets to pick from whatever ability sets your player they get to pick from, and they can be like, oh, cool. Now I need to look up what can my character do in this moment. Oh, let me look at my cards. Nice thing is these are standard playing card size cards. So there are 6 million ways that they've invented for storing basically these size cards because of the popularity of things like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering and things like that. And so, it's really easy to sleeve these if you just want to sleeve them and put them in a deck box that character has for their character. Now they stick the cards that they're using inside the deck box. There maybe their figurine, their miniature, maybe their dice, and so anything else. Cool. Now they have a deck box, which is their character. Or you can go the baseball card style, where it's the notebook, basically the 3-ring binder that you open up and has a grid of 9 cards that you just pop the sheet out, you put it in front of you, and now you can see, oh, these are the cards I'm using for these sessions. Yeah, 3D printed options for card holders, tokens, etc., etc. All of those are really easy to make, and they give you a quick and easy way for your player to avoid that. It's a brand new game. I don't know what to do. So basically, it's like, hey, basically, this gives me I don't have to go hunting through a character sheet. My character sheet can be relatively straightforward. It doesn't have to be cluttered with a lot of rules text, because the rule text, if I need, is on this card, and basically then I'm dealing with it and I'm done and I can move on. If I'm not using it, it's not taking up room and making it harder for me to find stuff on my character sheet. So basically, I really like the cards. They're a great way of, but I always encourage, basically, a lot of people, sometimes you get the question of, hey, what do I do with new players? What do I do with players who don't know what they're doing? Maybe they're coming in from video games and things like that. This is like a menu option in a video game. You hover over it, it gives you a description, you click the button, you say, I'm doing this, and the action happens. People can understand that, as opposed to if you hand them a character, a piece of paper with a bunch of obscure stuff on it, and then like a book, and there's a chapter in this book somewhere around here which describes exactly what your stuff on your character sheet does, and now that book is halfway across the table because you're the only you're the only one who actually bought the book. Maybe someone else has a PDF, maybe not, etc., etc. So basically, cards are a great way of dealing with that. Something else that they do, which is cool, so it's good. When they talk about when you're putting together the actual system, the actual dice rolling system itself, is they have you roll. You have your hope die and you have your fear die, and those are your 2 main dies that you're going to roll. Actually, I can pull them. Actually, they give you the one thing I didn't need but got anyway. I mostly got it for the cards, the jam screen, and the printed character sheets, because I'm going to say I don't need the dice. That said, they're pretty dice. Let's not be wrong. Let's not beat around the bush here. They're nice, pretty dice. They have. Oop, can I get to focus? Yep, kind of. It thought about it. It's sticky. It's like there's a face in camera. You want me to focus on the face? I've been trained to focus on the face. If I lead out of camera, maybe I could get it to focus. Whoop. Maybe. In any case, so they're pretty nice. Then the system is based around D12s, so it has 2 D12s of different colors. You have a white one and a black one. They're pretty. They're shiny. Basic key with the cards too. Oh, okay, that's good. And so. But the dice are 2 different colors because of the fact that one you designate as your hope, probably the white one. One you designate fear, probably the purple one. And you roll those 2, and if then you end up in a system there that they credit in the book. They say was kind of taken out of the Star Wars system, Genesis, Fantasy Flight system, which is, hey. If one is higher than the other, if one is higher than the other, then that is the tone, the flavor to your result. If hope is higher, then you're succeeded with hope. If fear is higher, you succeeded with fear. If you failed with hope or you failed with fear, and if the numbers are both the same, it's a critical. Yay. Critical is an automatic success. So that takes care of it. fear and basically fear and hope. Basically, they're going to flavor your results. So they're going to tell you basically they'll use the classic example is your rogue goes up and picks a lock. It's a difficult lock, and you know the fact that there is a chance for failure for it's not rogue. They have other names for things. But you want the character who's picking the lock to basically realize there are consequences to this decision. So so they have succeed with fear. Basically, you can succeed with hope, succeed with fear. You can succeed. Basically, you can fail, and you can fail with hope, or you can fail with fear. And what that means is that, okay, you succeed in picking the lock, but you succeed with hope. Cool. You learned something extra. Maybe you learned something about the way the security system worked. Maybe you picked the lock and you're 100%. Basically, you did so well that you would know the fact that no one heard it, or you did it really quickly, or a number of things. Basically you could do that. You also get a hope point, which basically hope points are used to power abilities and other things like that. But so you have that. Basically, you get hope. Basically, flip side, if you succeed with fear, the GM gets that fear point, and the GM can use that to manipulate the world and add in danger and add in consequences and things like that. And also, it basically be like basically flipping to what we just did with the success. You succeeded, but you're fairly certain you were making a lot of noise doing it, or it took you super long to do it, or you've tripped an alarm. Something like that when you succeeded. That's succeeding with fear. Flipping it around, basically you're failing with hope. Maybe you open the maybe it's still opened, but there's complications and things like that. Basically, there are complications, but you succeeded in opening it. That could be failing with hope. Or it could be you didn't open it at all, but you learned something about the security system, and now you realize, oh, hey, there's an alarm on this. I have to go disable that first. I need to basically picking future locks. I know that I need to pull out a different set of tools for those, and so you'll get a advantage or disadvantage on those future rolls, etc., etc. Failing with fear basically means things have gone really bad, and you can, again, failure doesn't have to mean the fact that failure shouldn't stop your game dead in its tracks. It should continue the story moving in some form or another. So if you need them to get through that door, you have them take a long time and alert people and et cetera, et cetera. You pile on consequences. Or maybe it's basically if you're like, nope, you have to try again because it's a combat situation and now it's going to consume more resources. Or basically they break their picks. Basically they succeed, but their picks are broken and there's no way they can continue doing that. Again, it's all that kind of, you're using that hope or failure to kind of determine what flavor it is. So the last bag that's in here, they're just lots of little tokens. So many things you could, there are green ones, which you can see, which will give you a view into darkness, because that's the background here. And so that's a green one. Normally they look like this when they're not getting chroma keyed out by the camera. So these are for 6 million different things, and basically you can always use tokens. They can represent hope, they can represent fear points for the GM if he wants to make sure they're visible to the players. You can grab like the evil purple ones and have them visible. Also, when you're building up rolls, they suggest you use basically hold it for basically one in front of your open palm. Okay. Can I see it? Yeah, it works. So basically, but in any case, when you're making a die roll, basically you're adding a bunch of stuff that you're rolling those 2 dice, and then you're adding a bunch of stuff to it. Basically, some pluses or minuses based on traits and other stuff that you might have. And rather than they're like, hey, here's an easy way to keep track of it, just start pulling these out and being like, okay, I get one from my trait. I get one from basically, I get one from this ability. I get one from this. Somebody's helping me. I get one from that. I pull it. Basically, actually helping adds dice, I think. But basically, it's like, oh, but I have a disadvantage. I have penalties, so I'm going to pull stuff out. Hey, Wolf Mom. And so basically, at the end of it, you have a pile of stuff rather than 1 + 1 + 2 + 1 - 1 is... do the math. It's like that. And just start plunking tokens down from your pile. Hey! Pesos money! Awesome. Thank you. So, basically, these are a great way. Why am I... That corner of the screen has just decided that it's going. That's cool. I don't know why you decided you're going. Like a breeze or something? Weird. Pay no attention to the room behind the curtain. But in any case, basically, this can make it easier for players who might be intimidated by math. You don't want to run into this. They're a great way of dealing with Pathfinder syndrome, as it were. Oh gosh, I have so many pluses and minuses, and now I have to sit here and do math for 20 seconds, and then go back and re-figure out my math, and things like that. But, so they give you a giant bag full of them. So... here's the tip. If you don't want to do that, go to Michael's. I'd say to go to Joanne's. Maybe go, basically, possibly a fish. Basically, possibly PetSmart, actually. At this point, PetSmart's probably going to overcharge you for them at this point, let's be honest. But basically, like, they usually sell, like, glass beads for, like, basically for fish tank fill, for plant fill. Hey, Michelangelos. Michelangelos, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thanks for the raid. Welcome. We're talking about Daggerheart. Basically, we're starting off with basically just a quick summary of what Daggerheart is, and we're looking at the big box of Daggerheart stuff that basically you can get, and then we're going to talk about the fact that this big box has a bunch of stuff. The one thing it doesn't have is a world, so we'll get to that in a second. But so. Basically, to summarize everything that's in here, it's got the physical cards, which are neat and cool. Basically, to keeping your players' attention and making it easier for them to reference stuff. It comes with dice, in case you need more dice. But more importantly, it comes with 2 different colors of D12s, because that's important for the fear and hope system, which is what flavors your success. It comes with a giant bag of bennies. I use bennies because my brain is immediately reverting to, that's Deadlands. But, so, basically, all that is in that drawer right there. Basically, Daggerheart's got some cool stuff, and I just shifted this box, and it just flew through things at me. I've got to be more careful about moving this box. Basically, Daggerheart.com has all of that. Even the basic system comes with books and the cards, and it's really sweet, yeah. But I think the book cover is slightly different. I think it looks more like that cover rather than this full art version here. Basically the hardcover is it's a really nice. Basically, they did a good job. It's well printed. Everything I've looked at, and basically people have looked through. Basically, have gone through it in more detail. It's got great splashes of art and other stuff, and it's from the Critical Role folks who are connected enough online, so you know the fact that everything in here isn't going to be AI. It's going to be actually drawn by actual people. It looks like the one behind me. Okay, that's what I figured. So, basically, it's got all that. Basically, the box is cool because it gives you, like, nicer versions of the hands-out. It does come with, the GM screen, which you can also order online. And it does come with character sheets. Which you can just print out online if you want to, as well. So, all of that is available in the box, or you can order just the book online. Basically, the hardcover is... I always like having hardcover and stuff because it's great to have at the table. I don't know why this cover is just deciding to be dumb, but it is. Let's just shove things that way. See if we can't fix it. There we go. Things moved. All right. Hey, thanks for the follow. All right. So we've talked a lot about Escape. So basically, talked a lot about what it is, and I'm not going to do a full review of Daggerheart here because there are a lot of people who are going to talk about it, and in general, my general thoughts on basically on TTRPG systems is if it's something that you are interested in as a GM, and it is something that your players are interested in playing, go for it. 90%, basically, if there are problems with the system, if there are basically some formatting issues and things like that, it's going to take more work on your part, sure, but if you basically, it could be the best system in the world, it could be the best laid out, have the most gorgeous art, it can have the most awesome and beautiful systems that distinctly basically deliver everything perfectly, and basically the systems are all balanced perfectly and tuned, and if your players aren't interested in it, it's garbage. It doesn't mean anything. It is a useless system to you if you don't have those things. I'm gonna pop myself back out of this full view so we can look more at the book here. So pardon me, I'm gonna disappear and basically I'm gonna be in two places at once. Hi, I'm up here. Nope, that's not me. That's me from the past. That's hilarious. If I do this, will you revert? Try this again. Hi. Try again. That's hilarious. I am stuck. I can't get out of here. I've been stuck in the past. Hello. Help me. I'm still here. Alright. I'm going to have to, like, remove this one, I think. We'll deactivate that one. We'll deactivate that one. We'll reactivate this one, which will put me back in the box. Pro streamer, yep. Boom. I exist again. I'm stuck here in the corner. All right. In any case, so basically, that's why I'm not going to do a full review of Daggerheart and go through it. Basically, everything I've seen, basically, it is in terms of basically, it's a well laid out book. It's got a bunch of cool, cool features and cool. Basically, it's well laid out. It has cool art. It has great sections on. But one of the things I will say is that I appreciate it has great sections on, hey, basically, when you're playing, where is that section? Basically, it's got a good GMing section. We'll get to that in a second. It must be back at... It has good sections on, hey, what is session 0 about, which we'll talk about here. It has good stuff on, hey, I want to play a blind character. I want to play a character with a disability or otherwise from a minority group. What does that mean? And hey, it talks a lot about, okay, here are they have some good articles written by, which are great for references on. Oh, there we go. Playing a visually blind or visually impaired character. Playing a deaf character. Playing with disability with purpose and respect. Great tools for, hey, basically, you're role-playing, but that never gives you an excuse for being a jerk in the game. Just because you're like, oh, it's what my character would do. Yes, and maybe what your character do, but the people hearing your character are still real people. They're still affected by what is going on. Reality doesn't stop because you're playing the game, and it doesn't just cleanly restart. What happens in the game also happens in real life. Sorry, that's just the way it works. People are going to be affected by things you do in the game, so be careful. So great stuff like on that in here. Basically, so it's a great thing to pick up, read, flip through, go through, and it's got great art. It's got a bunch of great other stuff. So, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. So the thing I'm going to talk about today in here is the fact that while this book has a ton of stuff in it, it's got a bunch of chapters. Basically, you can flip up here. Basically, introduction, preparing, planning an adventure, running an adventure, adversaries and environments. It doesn't really have a world in it. There isn't really even a sample campaign. There isn't, they have chapters on environments. They have chapters on, basically they have a chapter on something they call campaign frames. So, because what they want you to lean into is collaborative storytelling. And so that's going to be kind of the focus for this stream is what is meant by collaborative storytelling and how do you as a GM handle that? So first things first, collaborative storytelling is going to be difficult. It's going to be different than basically possibly if you've run a lot of games in the past. If you've run a lot of pre-built modules and things like that, it's going to feel different. It's going to feel maybe harder, or it's going to feel basically a little bit more by the seat of your pants, because things are going to happen that you aren't necessarily going to have as much control of that you used to. But in some ways, it's going to be easier. So this idea is the fact that you're inviting your players into the GM seat a little bit. You're inviting players into the storytelling element from the start. And so this all starts from what is colloquially known as Session 0. Session 0 is basically, they suggest it's a full-blown session, basically a 4-hour thing. It can be held in person. It can be held online. If you're running basically in simpler cases, session zeros can be text threads. I mean, you can be just as simple as that. Get everybody into a text thread and have them actually everybody is basically it's. But you want everybody who is going to be involved in it in one place at the same time, because you're going to build out the world and a little bit of the story, at basically together as a group, and so. The interesting thing is a lot of the time it's going to kind of change. Basically, it's going to change your order of how you as a GM function. So normally when you're a GM, basically I'm going to flip to basically our product here. So normally when you're a GM, you're going to start off, you're going to create a campaign, and you're going to come in here and you're going to fill out the description, you're going to fill out the introduction, you're going to fill out content warnings if you're thinking about them, and you're going to start throwing things together. You're going to start building out some events, some key things, some locations that you want, basically things are going to take place. Maybe some NPCs that they're going to run into, some monsters you think are cool, some items, basically maybe the big bad. You're going to throw them all together, and you're going to start dropping them in here, basically, and you're going to start recording them. And Lorelink's a great way, basically just start chucking things in there, start building things out, and you're going to just start basically thinking about it. Then when you're all done with that, you're going to come back here to the sessions, and you're going to start putting together what happens in the first session. You're going to be like, aha, it's going to be, this is going to happen, this is going to kick off, and then they're going to go here, and then they're going to go that. Oh, later, Wolf Mom. And so that's what you're going to start with. What collaborative games want you to do is, during session 0, you're going to pull everyone together, and you're going to lay out, basically, you're going to start with a basic framework. Daggerheart has what they call our campaign frames, and that is kind of the basic idea for a setting. They've got several in here. They've got one called the Witherweld. I will say again, they've done a great job with, hey, I want some wild worlds to get some really cool ideas to start throwing at. Basically, the Witherweld has a little sentence description, kind of basically an elevator pitch. When an invading nation attacks an ancient forest deity, a virulent overgrowth spreads throughout the land. 5 Banners Burning is a different one. Basically, long brewing tensions between rival nations boil over, threatening all-out war. Beast Feast. When a small village's monster system's defense fails, the local heroes must venture out the endless caverns below to fix it and cook up trouble for the creatures that stand in their way. Basically, I'm guessing that somebody saw or read Delicious in Dungeon. There's Age of Umbra. Dying World, Immersed in Relentless Shadows. Again, these are just little short things. Basically, they've got pitches associated with them, and then they've got a little bit of overview and how it modifies the Daggerheart system and world. They're like, okay, here's some differences for how the ancestries basically interact. Here's some difference how the classes interact. Here's how the players and GMs are going to basically kind of work out. And here's an inciting incident for you. Basically the one that shows basically, hey, how much effort basically went into this. Motherboard is probably my favorite for that. In a world where magic takes the form of technology left behind by a long-fallen civilization, a new threat basically spreads a malicious virus. I don't want to go too deep into this one, but what I do want to show off, because obviously there's some other stuff in here, there has an entire language that they have developed, which is writing in circuitry. It has to do with basically different patterns, basically all of this spells out basically words, and it's got ands and ors and there is and definitive articles and modifying and things like that. So you end up with these ridiculously over the top. Basically, they created an entire language for you to build stuff out in. It's insane. It's awesome. That basically it's just one of the worlds they give you. Is hanging out basically just kind of like here's how you could build a language out in this world, which is lost language, basically lost written words to technology, and this is how they used to talk, and it's a wild and crazy thing. So I love it. But so all of these things are in here to basically kind of you put them in front of your players, and you're like, okay, here's the basic idea of what we're going for. How do we basically, and then let's start building out what this world looks like. So there's a couple of different ways that basically Daggerheart leans a little bit more on, they give you a bunch of stuff they give you a bunch of ideas, and then they're kind of like, basically like they'll even break out some session 0 questions for you, things like that. They give you some guidance and things like that. Basically, this is the idea of the fact that you're going to invite your players in, and you're going to be like, hey, I want you to have some buy-in into this world because I want you to put together places in this world. I want you to come up with a town that you create. I want you to come up with basically a place that you have got input into. Basically why are the people in this town like this? Where is your character from in this world? And go ahead, and what they do is they actually have you pull out a map. Looks like basically an image like this. And they're going to be like, hey, we want you basically have people come in and start putting places putting places onto this map. They give you a list of this list up here in the corner is some place names. They're not on the map, but maybe you look at this and you're like, oh, basically the Somnolent Shore. That sounds cool. I want my character to be from a place called the Somnolent Shore, and I think it's going to be right here, basically right in this little nook right here. That's where I'm going to say it is. It's in the town. It's in the Haven side, and so in your character, they're going to start coming up with ideas for what that means. What that place means to them, what type of people are there. And so they're not just writing the backstory for their character, they're putting that character into the world and basically making that character part of it. And the other players who are listening to it could be like, oh, that sounds like a cool place. I want my character to also be there. I want my character to come from that place or have visited that place. And now they're building a connection out because they're like, oh, maybe while my character visited there because my character had a merchant background, my character visited this town, maybe they encountered your character who was there. Maybe they sparked an incident that caused that character to adventure onwards, whether immediately or maybe they're meeting up later. And so you're starting to build out this world, and you're starting to put places and things into it. And here's the secret: they're doing your job for you as a GM. They're helping you out. You don't have to create everything on your own. You're starting to build out this place, this idea that everyone is invested in, and they're all bringing they're bringing their little bit in, and they're getting buy-in. And so they want you to start building this world out, start working with your players to look into this, basically into this world, and you're throwing out, they have you go ahead and build, basically throw out some of the talking about the world and things like that, because Daggerheart starts to build out some of those ideas for you. Basically, they have a little bit of a setting with it. They give you some things like, hey, in this world, people are suspicious of magic. Basically, danger is everywhere. And so that's how this world works. So how does all of these things. So they start to put these things together. They start to put them in front of you. They give them to you to hand out to your players. Whether you want to give out all of them to them, or basically you're like, okay, I don't think this group would know this fact. Or maybe I think basically people from this area would know these things, but people from this area necessarily wouldn't. And so I'm going to hold some of that stuff back. And so basically putting the map, and so I put the map in here into Lorelink, and that makes it really easy for me when the players start throwing out ideas. They're like, oh, hey, I want the somnolent shore, so I'm going to quick create. I'm going to misspell somnolent. Yep. I don't use the word. Sure. I'm just going to quickly create that. Sorry for moving the mic. And basically they're like, oh, okay, it's there. I'm going to pop that in. And so now that's on the map right there. They're like, well, maybe we want to move it. Yeah, you can move it later. They move it up there. Cool. And so you're just going to start populating this with okay, what's this giant tree here? Maybe your players have a really interesting idea, what this tree is, what this sure, that seems obvious that it's the tree spire, and so your players are like, oh, it's totally the tree spire, but maybe that's not. Maybe the tree spire is stone because of some event that happened that changed this well-known tree into stone, and your players start to come up with a background for it. And basically, there's the reason why. Maybe they're connecting something into the world background that they've given, that you've kind of started to set out, that there's an inciting incident, that there's something, and maybe now your villain starts to take a little bit of shape of, oh, hey, did they cause this event to happen? Or can they take advantage of the fact that this event had happened? Can they capture some of that, etc., etc.? Starting to build out on that. And so Lorelink is great for sitting down in this session 0. And if you're looking at it, what you do is you started to build some of the stuff out in here. Maybe you put some of your basic events in. Some of the you've built some in the world. You put some notes in on how the world works. You're building that out. But then you're you're creating notes on how the world works, things like that. But you're keeping those secret from the players, so the players don't see that. So that's not visible. That's not not shared with the players. And so things are you're starting to build those, kind of putting those things together. But you're sharing the campaign, and your players can start to add their own notes to this. And so maybe they go into the Somnolent Shore, and you invite them into it, and they're going to write their own notes on why they think the shores working the just something like that. And so maybe they suggest that maybe you'll take that note, and then you'll add it into maybe you'll add it into the description, or you add it into into the read aloud. So so that's something that the players can all see. Things maybe you just have place names that you create and you put on there because you're like, hey, I think that one of these places is going to be, maybe you decide to put the tree spire on there, and so you name that. But maybe your players know where it is, But anybody, and all you want them to know is the fact that it exists, and that's all it is. So that's what existence is shared is for. But they can see it, and so they're going to basically, you're going to start building it out, and basically they're going to take note of it. Maybe they want to reference it in their, basically in one of their notes or in their player, basically in their player backstory, things like that, that they're creating over here. That they're like, oh, okay, I want to create this. I want to add this in. I want to add this detail. I want to link to basically that they visited in, or they see. Basically, maybe they're like, basically, dreams of seeing the. That's not how you spell seeing. Let's try it again. Basically, you add the locations. And if it's visible to them, they'll be able to reference it. Basically, they'll be able to put it in there. Basically, either there, and you can have it in their backstory. Like, oh, okay, basically reference that, and so now you've got that link, you've got that point. You can see where things are and where things are coming from. You're like, oh, okay, starting to piece this all together, starting to figure out how all of this works. This is how Daggerheart, basically that's kind of how Daggerheart wants you to do it. There are a couple other things you can add in here. And I'm going to talk about a couple of other systems that also do collaborative storytelling, which I like some of the ideas they have as well. And you may want to put them into your story as well. So the first one I'm going to pull out, basically they both are kind of riffs on the same idea. One is a little bit more detailed than the other. Basically, first we'll talk about basically Kids on Bikes has a section, basically it's chapter 2. Both of these things, and I don't know if Daggerheart calls it out in particular, but it is a good idea to do the world building and then do character creation. That way your players are getting ideas for their characters as they're doing the world building, and when they create their background, they're not just flipping through a book and fitting whatever they find in the book into whatever preconceived idea they have in their head. Like, oh, I think he's a city boy, so let me go find a big city somewhere in the book. Here's a list of cities. Cool, that sounds like a cool name. I'm going to pick that one. They're going to be like, oh, no, this is a city I created, or this is a city that someone else in the group created that I want. I like what they talked about, some of the ideas that they built into that city, and I want to be from that particular city. Basically, Kids on Bikes basically sits down and asks the players a bunch of questions about basically they're narrowing the scope into a particular town. So if you want this session to start off and basically be the focus of it to be, okay, everybody in this group is from one particular town or village or country or kingdom or however you want to do it, basically you start off with a bunch of questions about it. That helps to basically, and the answers to those questions will build up this world that you're going to create and give you at the end of it, a quick reference to, here's what we've created. Basically Kids on Bikes is focused in on a small town because Kids on Bikes is going for that Stranger Things experience. So it's pushing for you to do a lot of, hey, our adventure takes place in basically name of the town, basically an industry in this town. The town is famous for, the town is infamous for, but these questions don't have to be just for a town in a modern setting or 1980s setting, as this is usually. You can tweak these questions and use them to describe a kingdom. Basically, you can use them. I don't think it's this basically. Like I haven't I know that they both exist, but I haven't looked to see if they're actually related or not. I'd have to double check that. In any case, so you're building out this so you've got this list of questions, and you're going to, when you're done with as you're asking them, you're going to record that in Laurel Lake. Maybe you just one is the name, the industry, industry, and you're going to basically, what is this kingdom known for industry? Basically, they are known for their fishing. They're known for gem mining. They're known for basically magical knights and bikes. Okay. Magical artifacts, things like that. So you're going to record all of these, save them in lore link, so you've got that list available to you. You can share it with the players, and basically build it from there. So having a list of questions to start off with is a great way of guiding people, especially people who are new and are like, I thought we were just going to play a game and basically you were just going to tell the story and that was it. Why are you asking? Why are you telling? Oh no, I'm in charge of all of this. Okay, questions are real. Basically, questions are a great way. Basically, every improv teacher and improv student can tell you, asking questions and getting answers to questions are a great way of spurring things and keeping things moving and getting people, prompting people to come up with stuff. And basically, in prompting people, you're going to start getting that imagination going, start getting those ideas flowing, and they're going to start thinking, oh, that's a key detail I want to remember for my character. Or that's a key detail that I want to remember for basically for something that we're going to do. And you're going to be doing the same thing. You're going to be pulling things out. You're like, oh, hey, yeah, they like the fact that this town, basically, that this kingdom does a lot of stuff with unearthing ancient artifacts and basically digging up ancient ruins because it's built on the remains of an ancient culture. Cool, that could have some great, basically, okay, maybe they dug something up. Maybe the villain wants something that's just still buried. Maybe there's a reason why the kingdom fell. Is there a cycle here or something like that? Cool, you've got these ideas. You're going to just take them and you're going to build on them when you start to flesh out your campaign. So basically, the other thing that Kids on Bikes has you do is, hey, you want to create the town, but again, you don't want to just basically your players are relatively new to this, and you don't want to terrify them. Cool, that's why you have dice. Dice are great at randomizing things, and so one of the great things they do is they have you just take a piece of paper, start with like a couple of roads, then throw dice at the map. And basically wherever the dice land, whatever number is showing is what is in that location. And so basically, oh, you rolled a 13, that's where the city dump is. Oh, basically there's an airport. Okay, the airport's over there. Basically, so maybe your town looks a little weird. Maybe is your airport near the city dump, or your airport in the center of town. Okay, is this town, maybe we should go back and revisit what this town industry is. Did the town grow up around the airport then? Oh, okay. Basically, they start to figuring out, maybe there's a forest in the center of town. Why is this forest special? Why did it remain there when all these other things went up around? Is there something different about it? Same thing with your map of the kingdom. Basically, we showed before that you've got this map here. Come up with a list of 20 different things that you think are cool, that every fantasy kingdom should have. And chuck dice at the map. And basically, as you come up with them, put it on, click on it, and then add it to the map and be like, yep, that's where, whoever came up with names it, you put it on the map, and you've got that. Now you're building this map out, and when you're done, you've got a fully featured map. And there are some games you can play with the dice numbers and what type of dice you roll. So things which are more common, you put at the lower numbers, and then you roll dice. You roll smaller dice in addition to the larger ones. So you're rolling 3d6s, so you're more likely to get things between 1 and 6, but you're rolling only 1d20 because you only want one of those wild, higher number of things to be up there. Maybe you're like, oh, I really want to guarantee a higher number shows up. Maybe you're like, okay, we're going to take a die and double it or triple it or something like that, just to roll a d4 and triple it, to basically be like, okay, I really want to make sure we have something between 3 and 12 and more likely to be higher. cool. But again, this can pull some of that pressure off of those players who are like, oh gosh, you want me to create a world? I'm not ready for that. Cool. Throw dice at things. It works great. Lastly, the other thing I'm going to talk about is the other type of thing I'm going to talk about in terms of other systems before I get back to just kind of collaborative in general, is that another system I love that has a great collaborative storytelling aspect is it's based off the Dresden Files books, which they're urban fantasy. So again, much like Kids on Bikes, are going to be focused in on supernatural and cities and things like that. But they've got a great ideas for world building that you can steal and pull out and put into your own game. And what this is the idea of the fact that you're sitting down, and this is especially like if you're creating a more modern day thing, you're not necessarily running Daggerheart, you're not necessarily running a fantasy, or you're running a fantasy urban campaign where it's most of the action is going to happen in one city or one location. So basically some of the art is art. But it's the idea of the fact that you're going to sit down, they suggest, basically they're doing an urban fantasy thing. So if you're doing a more modern campaign, pick a city it's going to take place in. It could be your city that you live in. It could be a large city that is nearby, or it could be just a city that everybody in the group is familiar with. Or again, if you're doing a fantasy campaign, maybe it's completely made up city or kingdom or something like that. And they suggest basically for a modern one, maybe you just go out and visit, basically go out and look around. And this works even for a fantasy type campaign or something like that. Get the group together and have a night out on the town, or a day out, an afternoon in the town. Basically take a look at what makes up if you're basing your campaign in a big city, take a look at an actual big city. And while infrastructure has changed in terms of some things and how things works, there is some things which are always going to be the same. You're going to notice, oh, hey, there are the bars, there are the places to get food, there are the administration, the more political type buildings. Taking a look at a city and getting a feel for how it's laid out, getting a feel for how people interact, how people get around, basically how those things are laid out, basically looking at places and realizing, oh, okay, these are types of places people like to congregate. These are basically things like that. If you're doing a modern campaign, you could point out stuff and be like, oh, hey, that's a cool name on that building. It's not the name that's current. It's basically because this building was built in 1890 or 1935. It's got this name on the building, which is no longer related to anything involved with it, but in our world, that's still the name of the building. Why is that still the name of the building? Who owns that building? Basically, in our world, it means this. And so your players can go around and pull those things out of the actual environment and come up with cool ideas. And then you're coming back into this session 0 of everybody full of place names and types of places. They're like, oh yeah, coffee shops and basically vegan eateries and sushi and grocery stores and convenience type stores and things like that. Things that you might not necessarily immediately think of when you're sitting down to build a city out, basically because you're like, oh gosh, it's a giant city, and so you're only thinking of the really big things. You're like, yeah, it's got school and a sports arena and a city hall. And you're like, oh, there's court buildings, there's transit centers, there's bail bond places. Those are near jails or near court places and things like that. Coffee shops which are near basically lawyer type places tend to have basically bars, and those types of places have certain types of clientele, et cetera, et cetera. And basically getting your players into that mindset so that when they come back, oh wow, cool, they're going to start throwing places and names on your map that basically, again, coming back to this map, they're gonna be like, oh, we need an X, we need a Y. I like this thing that I saw. And if you're using an existing place, maybe you pulled up and you grabbed a Google Map image of the town or the city or basically a section of it, and you're dropping places in and being like, oh, okay, cool. These are basically, here's what's in our version of these places. In our version of the place, there's a coffee shop here, and it's near the river, so it's called this river-related name. And so the other big thing, basically the big thing that Dresden File has you do, is it has you talk about basically basically, they also recommend that there's also, when in doubt, there's the Vancouver method, which is basically the idea of the fact that the city of Vancouver has stood in for, because it's cheap to film there, has stood in for every major city ever. And so you can always just grab an existing city, strip the names off of it, and basically say, this is now the city of X. It just happens to look a lot like the map of Vancouver, Chicago, Indianapolis, whatever. Where basically you're just saving yourself the time and pulling it out, and just grabbing some places and things like that from it, but making it completely your own. And so you're going to have people basically going through, basically, so then you're going to be like, what's the theme of this, basically, of this city? What is the reoccurring kind of, like, is this a city known for corrupt politicians? And so that's a theme, basically, that's a theme of the city. Maybe it's basically groups in the cities, or basically there's a certain type of, basically an aspect, like the knights of this town are basically control everything. And basically if they want something, they're going to get it. Or maybe there's always these types of people who keep showing, basically certain types, there's a certain class of people who are mistreated or basically or otherwise taken advantage of, and you want that to be a theme of your game, is these people rising up and your group helping that group or being part of that group. Things like that. And so you're going to start coming up with what is key. Maybe there are certain threats that are taking place in your city in terms of basically people who go into these woods at night come out different or changed or dead. Things like that. And so you're coming up with basically what are some of the things which are going on. If you're basically, this idea is basically like Daggerheart basically has you, hey, put some places on the map, and basically your players are going to start with that. Basically, you still have the main control of the story. They're just adding elements and bits and pieces and adding decoration to it, but you still have the main thrust kind of already there. This is what's below that. Basically, we're not even going to start with that. And as a GM, you're like, I want to listen to my players and start pulling their input in. And so that's why you're going to start and so they have basically sheets that you hand out at the table that look like this. The idea basically, and people are going to fill out this as a group of what's the idea. Some of this is fate themed, which is why you have aspects and things like that. But it's the what ideas do they have, and then what names are you associating with those ideas? So if you're like, hey, basically the politicians are all corrupt, you're going to start maybe somebody starts naming some of those politicians and giving them names. Maybe they're small-time governors, small-time sheriff, maybe they're larger, basically, but you're going to put a name on them. And then again, now you have a hook. Basically, you're going to go back into this. You're going to record those ideas in LoreLink. You're going to mark up, okay, this is a character that got created, and they're associated with this location, or basically this part of town. And as you're building things through, so you're starting off at this high level of here's the big themes. They're corrupt cities. There's this group which is in charge. Basically these knights rule everything. Or again, basically maybe there's a group of people who are gifted, cursed with magic, basically with magical abilities, and because of that they are basically kept as chattel because they are because they have these abilities and they're basically, but they're physically weak. So they're taken advantage of for their magical abilities and made to serve those who are. It's bothering me that I'm not taking up enough of the frame. I don't know why it just suddenly got to me. And of course that caused my camera to shift. I made a mistake. I made a horrible mistake. There we go. We'll just go back. It worked. It's fine. But it's the idea of basically you're starting to build this out. And some of the other stuff they have on that sheet is they have like, okay, once you start establishing some of those themes, then you're getting into the deeper. Basically, if you have a higher level story, like this one's focused on, it's urban fantasy, so there's always there's a supernatural world and there's an actual world, and some people are in one, some people are in another. Basically, and so that's the focus of this sheet. Basically, if you're not doing that type of story, you could still have basically two different types of groups depending on what themes you've picked above. Maybe it's basically who's in power. Basically, what is the status quo for this kingdom? What is the status quo for the people in power? What is the status quo for people who are basically for this class? Basically who is working to maintain, basically then you got that section at the bottom of who's moving stuff around, who's wants things to stay the same, wants things to change, and that's your friction. That's some, and you're getting your players involved with, oh hey, we've built out we've got this sheriff, but maybe he's greedy and maybe he wants the things to change, not necessarily for the better of everyone, but maybe just for the better of himself. But he's looking to rock the boat. Okay, so he's starting to move, and basically his name is starting to come up. And so now that your players, basically you've got this recording, and so you're going to do that. And then the next session they have is start to describe places in the town, basically, and you've got all these people, and so you're going to naturally be like, oh hey, this class of people, these types of people meet at this type of bar. These type of people, basically the rich and the famous hang out in these restaurants. Or maybe there's an underground club where these two intermingle, but it's a weird, basically the social dynamic is weird. And so here's some intersection points. And you're starting to then maybe the person who controls that has their own angle, their own schemes, or basically some of those names you listed above, basically maybe you're going to add to them, or maybe you're pulling them into this location section. And your players are basically it's not just you doing this. Everybody around the table is throwing out one idea, and then maybe they'll take their idea and someone else's idea and mash them together and create a location or something else. Or maybe someone else will grab that and basically mash them in with their own ideas that they've got. And they'll be like, oh, cool, I think that works for that. And they'll run with that. And you're taking all of it in, and you're going to be recording it all. Basically, you're going to take the sheet when you're done, and you're going to be recording it all in LoreLink. It's really easy. You've got all those locations set up already for you. You've got those villains already. Basically, you're going to create those villains. They're going to be done for you. You're going to then start linking them together. You're going to be like, oh, hey, we have that. We got Sheriff Corrupt over here. And basically we're going to go into him, and we're going to we're going to go back to the Tree Spire. And maybe that is where he hangs out. Or maybe it's something that he likes, or something like that. Basically, and you're going to start building out those relationships. Now, I will take a brief advertising thing aside to say, yes, we are aware that link there was really kind of weak. It would be better if you could name that relationship and possibly add some more details in there. Hang on to that thought. It will be coming soon. It's kind of there basically we have a whole bunch of really cool stuff. June is going to be a big month for LoreLink, so I'll talk about more of that in a bit here. But in any case, I'm getting ahead of myself. You're going to record all those things, link them together in LoreLink, and you're going to have this, when you're done with your session 0, you as a GM are going to have this great atlas already built for you. And the best part is as opposed to basically if I run out, basically if you go out and basically I've got a ton of books over there which have settings and things like that which are already set up for me, but the players aren't necessarily invested in them. Sometimes they are. Basically, if you've been playing, people have been playing and listening to D&D, if you'd say Strahd to them, that's going to basically, or you say Ravenloft to them, or you say Waterdeep, or the Forgotten Realms, or Sword Coast, Dritz. You're going to basically some names and ideas of basically maybe your group has an idea behind them, but maybe not. And so they're going to be building their characters in this kind of vacuum of they're from a small city. Look up list of small cities. That one. But here, they know it's a small city. They know the type of people, and they're going to pick that one because maybe they or their friends, they and you and the group put this together. And so now this town has a life. And so if you threaten that town, whether it is something that is happening, basically it's the basis for your story or something that happens later, if you put that, basically you put pressure or threat on that town, it means something. They know the people who live there, they created them. They had they know the fact that they're they know it's a fishing village that really that got founded long ago when a group of sailors who fell asleep on their ship crashed their ship onto the shore. Basically thought they were shipwrecked and lost, but managed to found the town and survive from there. And it's all built into their history. And they have jokes and in jokes and slang about sleepiness and about being lazy and things like that, because all the town knows that you just barely survived because of that. And so it means something to them. And so if you're like, the villain has stated the fact that they are going to basically going to dig up this town to find the artifact that is buried underneath, or they're going to use an evil curse to poison the well in that town. That means something to them. They know those people. And they're going to react. They're going to be invested much, much more than if you just say, hey, here's a town. This is the town you're from. They're going to be like, oh, basically, and so you're getting your players to basically invest in your world before the game even starts. And it's going to make your job just that a little bit easier. It's going to help basically make narrative choices more weighty. It's going to make your villain more invested, more involved. People are going to know ahead of time, oh yeah, we all work together. We kind of created that. We know because a lot of times these we grew up in this town and we know that there's a problem with this class of people. We know that there's a problem with this gang, this group. We know that these monsters in the woods are a trouble, have always been a trouble for the town. We know that that these groups of people in power have been corrupt. You're not having to tell your players that at the beginning. It's not like, oh, you need to make a die roll to figure it out. This, again, you put all this into LoreLink and stuff that they've created, you have shared with them, and they can come in and look at it. They can look things up. They could be like, oh yeah, we talked about this. We created this. They're going to put their own notes on stuff. They may even approach you outside of that session and be like, hey, my character doesn't know who their parents were, says they don't know who their parents were, but that's not true. They feel that they actually came from this other town over here, but they fled this town because of that, and along the way they got separated from their parents, or their parents died, or they ran away from the town, and so they're being hunted from this town rather than this other story. And they can do that because they know the world, and they know where to move things and where how to invest. And so you've added all those things into LoreLink, and now that all of that is available to them to be like, oh yeah, we created a town that had something like that. I want to say we're going to go to there. We're going to talk to those people. And you as a GM, what you're getting this great atlas out of it that your players have buy into, that you can start to drop your ideas and your concepts into and your through line through. So you can figure out, oh, okay, here's what's going on. Here's how I'm going to weave my story through all these things. I'm going to pull these things in, and reveals can be impactful reveals because they'll be like, and this is the guy who was responsible for that. And the players are like, oh, we've always wondered about that. Basically, we created that mystery, and now it's finally revealed, basically, why there was an X or a Y or something like that. Why this event was in the history, why this town was founded. Basically, again, when your players are emotionally involved and invested in the campaign, it is easier for you as a GM. Get that buy-in. Now, I've said all of this basically to kind of wrap it up. This isn't going to be for everybody. Sometimes, basically, some groups of players are going to be too intimidated by you asking them to sit down and invest a lot of effort and emotional effort and into, hey, let's help create this world. Understandable. So basically, you're still going to do a session 0. You still want to do character creation together. You still want your characters to kind of at least start building off of each other. Unless you're deliberately going for all these people get dropped in out of nowhere and they don't know anything about the world or each other. Go. Basically, then maybe you'll handle that. Session 0 still needs to happen for all of the other reasons I've always talked about. Terms of making sure that your players are on board with what you're doing, have a basic idea for what type of adventure it is. Basically, they talk about, in going back to Daggerheart briefly, they have the CATS system, which is basically the idea of how to putting things in front of your players and being like, everyone agrees to how this game is going to feel right from the start. And so you're dealing with all of those, making sure your players have safety mechanisms in place. So still do that with a session 0, but again, that may become more of a email request for feedback, a group thread. It doesn't have to be we're going to hang out together in a house for 4 hours or something like that to build all these things out. So both of those are basically either you're setting up, you set up all the things in advance and you're coming in. I would still, I always say, before you get your players into it, don't paint your story too thick. Don't trace with pencils. Don't do final lines yet, because your players are still part of this world. That is the point of a role-playing game, is that your players, even without all of the stuff we just talked about, it's still a collaborative storytelling effort. Your players should have an effect on your world. If your story starts at point A, goes to point B, and nothing your players can do can change that, you're not playing a game, you're not writing, you're not doing a TTRPG, you're telling them a story. That's cool, but that's not why they came here. That's not what you're going for. If you're not prepared for your story to go to B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K on the way to Z, then you need to reconsider why you're being a GM. You need to be flexible. You need to handle your players doing things because you're rolling dice. Unless you're doing a diceless system, things are going to change randomly. Your players will succeed when you expect them to fail. They'll fail when you expect them to succeed. They'll be mediocre for a random stretch. So basically at every level, this is a collaborative game. Be prepared for that. So all of that to say, basically collaborative storytelling, however, is a great way to get your players involved, get your players interested, and get them emotionally invested in your world even before the game starts. All right, so basically, that's all I'm going to say about that for now. Basically, if you want to hear me babble on more about cool stuff, about GMing tricks and trips and techniques, that's what I have other things for. You can see me do this sort of stuff in person. We are going to be at Origins in just under 2 weeks. Oh gosh, why? Um, Basically, we have 2 panels running at Origins, and we will have a booth at Origins. So you can see me and Mike, my co-presenter, talking in person about um, basically about GMing tips and tricks, about picking different games and different aspects of different game systems. Basically, Mike will be running his Pendragon game, which if you caught us last Friday, we ran basically the second half of the Pendragon Sword campaign. And basically, we had a great time with characters nearly dying in battle, and basically triumphant clashes, and basically people falling off of horses and getting back onto horses, and people stabbing people with lances and other stuff. So basically, a great time was had. So you can basically, if you want to catch up on any of that stuff, if you want to see more about Kids and Bike, for example, I talked about that in the past, basically in more broader details. You can check all of those videos out on our YouTube channel. Basically it's youtube.com/@lorelink. And that one basically has all of our archives, videos archived right there. So if you want to go check those out, they're available on our YouTube. Basically, they're on our YouTube channel, and this video will be archived there immediately after this stream ends. So that is available. If you want to see what else we're doing in the future, we have a stream schedule for all of June. So basically, next week, basically coming back on Monday, Mike will be here not with Pendragon, but with basically Quest of the Frozen Flame. That's his ongoing for multiple year Pathfinder 2nd Edition campaign. So if you're curious on what does Lorelink look like once you get 600, basically not 600, basically, well, 600 items and quests and things like that all built in there. How does that look? How does that feel? Check out, basically check that out there. Basically that will be on Monday. On Tuesday, I'll be talking about over-the-top actions games. I'll be looking at basically one of my favorite games, Feng Shui 2, and a relative newcomer into the action movie space, Outgunned. Basically, I'm curious on how that one works. I'm curious to be interested to dig into that one and see how it all works out. I've heard lots of great things about it, so I'll be curious to see. We can take a look at that. And then the week after that, we won't have a stream because we'll be at Origins. Booth 200 at Origins. You can catch us there. If you come see us in person at the booth, we might even have cool swag. And we'll definitely have cool stuff in terms of Lorelink. We're hoping we'll have some really cool features and things like that you'll be able to come and check out personally. Basically, the big thing is we're starting to end the Kickstarter phase, thanks to all of our backers on that, and starting to open this up to more and more people. Right now, we're in the phase where a lot of our bigger features, like the player sharing I talked about, and our like the hotspotting on maps. Basically, those features are currently paid backers only. Right now, however, we only have 2 free campaigns. You can sign up for our free account, the World Tier account, and you can check those out at lorelink.com/getstarted. And that will take you to our our landing page, and you'll be able to sign up for a free account that will get you all the campaign stuff so you can start recording and organizing all that things. And then as we exit that early access phase, you'll be able to do the thing we love for you to do, which is give us money, and you'll be able to access some of these cool, formerly locked out, features such as hotspotting on maps and player sharing, sharing your campaign with your player. So all of those will be available will be available coming soon. If you want to know exactly when that happens, that means you need to be involved in our social media, which would be our Blue Sky account, which is one way of we are Lorelink on Blue Sky. Lorelink.com, I think, on Blue Sky. I can't remember exactly. But But we are Lorelink on Blue Sky. You can look us up there. You can also, basically, if you're like, I don't want to deal with social media because social media is kind of basically, I'm avoiding that. Good for you. You can also get our newsletter, which you basically have an ESK, which will tell you all the cool details about all the cool features which are coming soon. At lorelink.com. Awesome. And of course, we're on Twitch. So that always means the fact that if you want to promote us, want to help us out, you want to know when we go live of all of these cool things, you can always check out this. You can always follow us here on the stream. Appreciate all those who have followed, all those who have subscribed. If you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you may or may not know the fact that that gives you a free subscription to basically to Twitch that you can give to any streaming group. We always appreciate. We have never require you to basically to subscribe to our channel. Following will let you know when we go live. So if we're talking about cool stuff like The One Ring or Outgunned or things like that, following will get you those notifications. Subscribe says, hey, I appreciate what you're doing and I want you to do more of it. Cool. Always appreciate that. And if you use that Amazon Prime, you get to do it for free, which means you get to take money out of Jeff Bezos' pockets and put it into ours. And we can guarantee, unlike him, we won't use the money on actual yachts. Maybe a DLC yacht. In-game yachts only, as the saying goes. So, I think I've talked about, basically that's just about everything. And we are... Tony thinks he knows that command. He's trying for it. And the bot basically may or may not respond. We'll find out. Oh, well. In any case, we're Lorelink. Basically, Lorelink is a campaign management tool. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks again for the raid. Thanks again for the subscriptions. And thanks again for the follows. We will catch you all later. Bye, all.